The first gunshot came at dawn. It shattered the kitchen window before Alara heard the sound. Glass exploding inward, coffee still steaming on the table. Cade was already moving, rifle in hand. Boots pounding the floorboards like a drumbeat before war. Outside, 20 horses. Maybe more. She didn't count. There wasn't time. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Not after everything. Not after the courthouse steps and the locked room, and the night she'd looked him in the eye and said, "I'm not hiding anymore." Not after they'd finally stopped running from the ghosts on this mountain and started building something that looked dangerously close to a future. But Marcus Grayson didn't care about futures. He cared about land and money and erasing anyone who stood in his way. The second shot punched through the wall beside her head. Alara dropped to the floor, reached for the Winchester. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. They'd stopped shaking the day she realized fear and courage weren't opposites. They were partners, and right now she needed both, because this was Black Ridge Summit, and nobody took it without a fight. The courthouse steps were slick with April rain when Alara Hayes arrived 19 years old, wearing her mother's dress. The gray one with buttons down the back that hadn't lined up right since she was 14. Her father walked beside her, but he wasn't really there. Thomas Hayes had stopped being present 3 weeks ago, right around the time the bank took the farm. Right around the time Marcus Grayson smiled that smile and said there was one way out. One way. "You don't have to do this," her father said. For the fourth time that morning, Alara didn't answer. They both knew it was a lie. The wagon rattled to a stop. Judge Carver stood on the steps, rain dripping off his hat brim. He looked at Alara the way you'd look at a lamb being led to slaughter. "Sad, but not sad enough to actually do anything about it, Miss Hayes," he said. "You're certain about this? I'm here, aren't I?" Behind her the town had gathered, not because they were happy for her, not because they wished her well. They came to watch, to see the girl whose father gambled away the family farm get handed over to the meanest son of a bitch in 3 counties. Cade Thornton. Even his name sounded like something that would draw blood. Alara had seen him exactly twice in her life, once at the general store when she was 14. He'd bought rope and nails and said exactly 0 words to anyone, just stood there, tall, built from stone and timber, like the mountain had shaped him. Scar running from his temple down to his jaw, once at the county fair, where he'd outbid everyone on a black stallion that had already killed 1 man. He was dangerous. Everyone said so, lived alone on Black Ridge Summit, didn't come down unless he needed supplies. Didn't talk, didn't smile, didn't give a damn what anyone thought about him, and now Alara was about to become his wife. "He's here," someone whispered. The crowd parted. Cade came up the courthouse steps, alone. No family, no friends, just him in a black coat that looked older than Alara, boots caked with mud from the mountain. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't acknowledge the stares, the whispers. The way people stepped back like he carried some kind of contagion. He looked at Alara. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Up close, he was worse than she remembered, not ugly. No, the problem was, he looked exactly like what he was. A man who'd spent years alone and had gotten comfortable with it. The scar pulling his expression into something that could have been anger. Could have been nothing at all. "You ready?" he asked. His voice was lower than she expected. Rough, but not cruel. "Do I have a choice?" His jaw tightened. No, at least he was honest. Judge Carver cleared his throat. "Shall we?" Inside, the courthouse smelled like wet wood and old paper. Alara's hands were shaking. She tucked them into the folds of her dress where no one could see. Her father stood to her left, Cade to her right, Judge Carver in front. Reading from a book that had probably married 100 other people, who actually wanted to be there, do you? Cade Thornton, take this woman. I do. He didn't wait for the whole question, just cut straight through it like he was signing a contract. Not making a vow, Judge Carver blinked. Well, do you, Alara Hayes? I do. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Then, by the power vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you man and wife. No kiss, no applause. Cade pulled a ring from his coat pocket, plain silver. Nothing fancy. Slid it onto her finger without ceremony. It was too big. Alara closed her hand into a fist so it wouldn't fall off. That's it, Judge Carver said quietly. You're married. Alara felt like she'd just signed her own death warrant. Outside, the rain had picked up. Cade walked to a wagon that looked like it had survived at least 2 wars, held out a hand to help her up. Alara ignored it, climbed up herself. If she was going to die on Black Ridge Summit, she'd at least do it on her own terms. Her father stood on the courthouse steps. Looking smaller than she'd ever seen him, Alara, she didn't look at him, couldn't. Just don't. Cade snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward. The ride up the mountain took 2 hours. Neither of them spoke. Alara watched the town disappear behind them, replaced by trees that grew taller and closer together the higher they climbed. The road, if you could call it that, was more mud than anything else. Twice the wagon nearly slid off the edge into nothing. Cade didn't seem bothered. He drove like a man who'd made this trip 1,000 times and expected to make it 1,000 more. Finally, Alara broke the silence. How far up do you live? Far enough. That's not an answer. He glanced at her. You'll see. Another 20 minutes passed. The trees opened up into a clearing, and Alara saw it. Black Ridge Summit. The house was big, bigger than it had any right to be for one man. 2 stories, dark wood, a porch that wrapped around the front, chimney leaking smoke into the gray sky. Behind it, the mountain rose up like a wall. Pine trees so thick you couldn't see where one ended, and the next began to the left. She could just make out the mouth of a mine. Timber supports holding back the earth. Cade stopped the wagon in front of the house, climbed down. This time Alara took his hand. His grip was solid, calloused. He let go the second her feet touched the ground. This is it, he said. Alara looked up at the house. It's big. Built it myself. Why? He didn't answer. Just grabbed her single bag from the back of the wagon and headed for the door. Inside, the house was warm. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. The smell of wood smoke and coffee filled the air. The furniture was simple, handmade from the looks of it, but sturdy. A table, chairs, a couch that had seen better days. Everything was clean, though. No dust, no clutter. Cade set her bag down by the stairs. Your room's upstairs. Second door, on the left. Alara blinked. My room? You got a problem with that? I just thought. She stopped. Never mind. Thought what? What? Nothing. Say it. Alara met his eyes. I thought you'd expect me to share yours. Cade stared at her. Then he turned, walked to the fire, added another log even though it didn't need it. I didn't marry you for that, he said without looking at her. You're safe here. I give you my word, as long as you're under this roof, no one touches you. Including me. That's not negotiable. Alara's breath caught. Then why did you marry me? Because your father owed Marcus Grayson $8,000. And Grayson said he'd forgive the debt if I took you off his hands. Cade turned around. So here we are. Alara's stomach dropped. Marcus Grayson arranged this? You didn't know? She shook her head. Cade's jaw tightened. Figures. Why would he? I don't know. He cut her off, and I don't care. You needed somewhere to go. I needed... He stopped. Doesn't matter. Point is, you've got a roof over your head and food to eat. That's more than you had this morning. He wasn't wrong. Alara picked up her bag. Which room? Second door on the left. She climbed the stairs without another word. The room was small but clean. A bed, a dresser, a window that looked out over the trees. Alara set her bag down, sat on the edge of the mattress, stared at the ring on her finger. Mrs. Cade Thornton. She didn't feel like a wife. She felt like a prisoner. Downstairs she heard Cade moving around. The clink of dishes, the scrape of a chair, normal sounds from a man who was anything but. Alara lay back on the bed, closed her eyes. She'd survived the wedding. Now she just had to survive everything else. The first week passed in a strange, silent routine. Cade left before dawn every morning, headed to the mine or the timber line or wherever it was he disappeared to. He'd come back at dusk, covered in dirt or sawdust. Wash up at the pump outside before coming in for dinner. Alara cooked, not because he asked, but because there wasn't much else to do, and they'd eat in silence at the table. He never touched her, never even came close. At night, she'd hear him moving around downstairs, stoking the fire, repairing something that didn't need repairing. Sometimes he'd sit on the porch for hours, just staring out at the dark. Alara didn't know what to make of him. On the 8th day, she found the locked room. It was at the end of the hall, past her room, past what she assumed was his. The door was solid wood, older than the rest of the house, with a heavy iron lock that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Alara tried the handle locked. Don't. She spun around. Cade stood at the top of the stairs, still in his work clothes, watching her. I wasn't. Yes, you were. He walked past her to his own room. That door stays locked. Why? Because I said so. That's not a reason. Cade stopped, turned. You want a reason? Fine. What's in that room is none of your business. You've got the whole rest of the house. That's more than most people get. So leave it alone. He disappeared into his room, shut the door. Alara stood in the hallway, staring at the locked door. Whatever was in there, Cade didn't want her to see it, which meant she absolutely had to know what it was. 2 days later, Alara found the letters. She wasn't snooping. Not really. She'd been looking for firewood in the shed behind the house when she knocked over a crate. A stack of papers spilled out onto the floor. At first, she thought they were just old receipts, bills of sale for timber or mining equipment. But then she saw her father's name, Thomas Hayes. Alara's hand shook as she picked up the first letter. It was from the bank, dated 6 months ago. Dear Mr. Hayes, this is to inform you that your outstanding loan of $8,000 is now in default. As per the terms of your agreement, failure to repay by the end of the month will result in foreclosure of your property and assets. Sincerely, Marcus Grayson, President. Ashford Bank and Trust. Alara frowned. Her father had always been bad with money. But $8,000? That didn't make sense. The farm wasn't worth half that. She picked up the next letter. This one was older, a year, maybe more. Mr. Hayes, enclosed is the agreed-upon sum of $2,000 for the expansion of your livestock operation. Repayment terms are as discussed. MG. Alara's stomach turned. There were more letters, dozens of them. Each one showed her father borrowing more money, signing more agreements, falling deeper into debt, but the amounts didn't add up. 2,000 here, 500 there. By Alara's count, her father should have owed maybe 4,000, not 8. She kept digging. At the bottom of the crate, she found a ledger, Marcus Grayson's ledger. Alara opened it. The first page was a list of names, people in Ashford who owed the bank money. Next to each name was a number, Thomas Hayes. $200. Alara stared at the page. 3,200, not 8,000. She flipped to the next page and the next, and then she found it. A second entry for her father, dated 3 months ago. Thomas Hayes, $8,000. Adjusted. Marcus Grayson had changed the amount. He'd doubled her father's debt out of nowhere and called it an adjustment. Alara's hands clenched around the ledger. That son of a... She kept reading. The next entry made her blood run cold. Arrangement with C. Thornton finalized. Debt forgiven upon marriage to E. Hayes. Ridge property to transfer upon Thornton's death or default. Alara read it 3 times. Marcus Grayson hadn't just arranged her marriage. He'd set a trap. If Cade died, or if something happened to make him unable to keep the property, Blackridge Summit would go to the bank, the house, the mine, the timber, all of it. And Alara was the bait. "What are you doing?" Alara turned. Cade stood in the doorway of the shed, covered in sawdust, staring at the papers in her hands. "I found these," she said. "In the crate." His face went hard. "Those aren't yours." "No, they're yours. And mine. And my father's." Alara held up the ledger. "Did you know Marcus Grayson lied about the debt?" Cade didn't answer. He doubled it. "My father owed 3,000, not 8. Grayson changed the books and called it an adjustment." "I know." Alara stared at him. "You knew?" "I figured it out 2 days after the wedding." "And you didn't tell me." Cade took the ledger from her hands, shoved it back into the crate. "What good would it have done? You were already here. The deal was already made. The deal was a lie. The deal kept you from starving." Cade's voice rose. Alara took a step back. He caught himself, lowered his tone. "Your father had nothing left. No land, no options. Grayson was going to take everything, and your father was going to end up in debtor's prison, or worse. So yeah, I made a deal. I married you. Grayson forgave the debt, and you got to keep breathing. That's the deal, and what do you get?" Cade looked at her for a long time. "A way to make sure Grayson doesn't take this mountain by marrying me? By keeping you alive." Alara's heart pounded. "What does that mean?" Cade turned. "Walked out of the shed, Cade." He didn't stop. Alara stood there, surrounded by letters and lies, and realized something. Marcus Grayson hadn't just destroyed her father. He was planning to destroy Cade, too, and she was standing right in the middle of it. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in her head. The letters, the ledger, the way Cade had looked at her when he said, "keeping you alive." What did Marcus Grayson want with Blackridge Summit? The mine, maybe. There were rumors it still had silver in it, though Cade never talked about what he pulled out of the mountain or the timber. Blackridge had some of the best trees in the territory, tall and straight, worth a fortune if you knew where to sell them. But that didn't explain why Grayson needed Cade dead. Unless he didn't just want the land, he wanted it free. Alara sat up. If Cade died, the property would go to his next of kin, and since he didn't have any family, it would go to his wife, Alara. And if something happened to Alara after that, an accident maybe, or an illness, the property would default to the bank, Marcus Grayson's bank. Alara's blood went cold. She wasn't just bait. She was a liability waiting to be eliminated. She threw off the blankets, went downstairs. Cade was on the porch. Same as every night. Sitting in the dark with a rifle across his lap. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking at her. "You need to tell me what's going on." "I did." "No." Alara sat down on the steps. "You told me Grayson wants this mountain. You didn't tell me why, or what he's planning to do to get it." Cade was quiet for a long time. Then he set the rifle down, leaned back in his chair. 3 years ago, he said, a man from the railroad came up here. Said they were planning to run a line through the mountains, and they needed land. A lot of it. Blackridge Summit was right in the middle of their route. "Did you sell?" "Hell no. I told them to go around, and they didn't like that. They offered me 10 times what this place is worth. I still said no." Cade shook his head. A month later, the railroad pulled out. Said the route wasn't profitable anymore. But the surveys were already done. The plans were already made. And Marcus Grayson had already bought up half the land along the proposed line. Alara's eyes widened. He was going to sell it to the railroad for a fortune. But without Black Ridge Summit, the route doesn't work. So Grayson's been trying to get me off this mountain ever since, and when you wouldn't leave, he went after my father." Cade nodded. "Grayson knew your father was drowning in debt, so he made it worse, doubled the amount, called it in early, and then offered me a deal. Marry you, and he'd forgive everything. But it's a trap." "Of course it's a trap." Cade looked at her. "If I die, you inherit the ridge. If you die after that, the bank takes it. Either way, Grayson gets what he wants." Alara felt sick. "So what do? We stay alive? That's your plan? You got a better one?" Alara didn't answer. Cade stood, picked up the rifle. "Get some sleep." "You're safe here, am I?" He stopped at the door. "As long as I'm breathing?" "Yeah, you are." Then he went inside, leaving Alara alone in the dark. She sat on the steps for a long time, staring out at the trees, and wondered how long as I'm breathing actually was. The next morning, Alara made a decision. If Marcus Grayson wanted her dead, then she needed to know everything, every lie, every scheme, every piece of leverage she could find. And the only place she'd find answers was in that locked room. She waited until Cade left for the mine, then she went upstairs, pulled a hairpin from her dresser, knelt in front of the lock. It took her 20 minutes, but eventually the lock clicked. Alara pushed the door open. The room was smaller than she expected, dark, dusty, and full of things that didn't make sense. There was a crib in the corner, a rocking chair by the window, a shelf lined with tiny shoes and folded blankets. Alara's breath caught. On the dresser, there was a photograph. She picked it up. It was Cade, younger, smiling, standing next to a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. She was holding a baby. Alara's hand shook. "I told you not to come in here." She spun around. Cade stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. "I'm sorry," Alara said quickly. "I didn't mean." "Get out, Cade, get out." Alara set the photograph down, walked past him into the hall. Behind her, she heard the door slam shut. She stood there, heart pounding, and realized she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross downstairs. The front door opened and closed. Cade was gone. Alara sank to the floor, put her head in her hands. She'd found the locked room, and now she understood why it was locked. Cade didn't come back that night. Alara sat at the kitchen table until the fire burned down to embers, listening to the wind howl through the pines. She'd made coffee twice, let it go cold both times. Every creak of the house made her jump, thinking it was him, but the door never opened. By morning, she'd given up on sleep entirely. She fed the fire, made breakfast she didn't eat, and tried not to think about the photograph. The woman's smile, the baby's tiny fingers, the way Cade had looked in that picture, like a completely different person. Around noon, she heard hoofbeats outside. Alara rushed to the window, but it wasn't Cade. It was an old man on a gray mare. Moving slow up the path, he wore a battered hat and a coat that had seen better decades. And when he dismounted, he did it like his knees hurt. Alara opened the door before he could knock. "Help you?" The man pulled off his hat. His face was weathered, lined deep from sun and years, but his eyes were sharp. "Name's Ezra Blackwell. I work for Cade. He around? Know you his wife?" Alara hesitated. "Yes." Ezra studied her for a moment, then nodded, figured as much. "Town's been talking about nothing else for 2 weeks. He glanced past her into the house. "Mind if I come in?" "Got something needs saying." Alara stepped aside. Ezra walked in like he'd been there before, heading straight for the kitchen table. Settling into a chair with a grunt, Alara stayed by the door. "Arms crossed, you going to sit?" Ezra asked. "I'm fine standing. Suit yourself." He pulled a pouch of tobacco from his pocket, started rolling a cigarette. "Cade tell you what I do here?" "He doesn't tell me much of anything." Ezra laughed, a rough sound that turned into a cough. Yeah, that sounds like him. I run the timber crew. Been working this mountain for near about 15 years. Knew Cade before he trailed off, lit the cigarette, well. Before, Alara moved to the table. Before what? Before he locked himself up here like a hermit. Ezra took a drag. He was different once. Had a wife. Little girl. Sarah and Emma. Their names were. Alara's chest tightened. What happened to them? Mine collapsed. 7 years ago this winter, Ezra stared at the cigarette like it might tell him something useful. Cade was down there when it happened. They got him out. But Sarah and the baby were visiting that day. Brought him lunch like they always did. They were near the entrance when the whole thing came down. They died. Sarah did, right there. Emma. Ezra shook his head. She held on for 3 days. Cade never left her side. When she finally went, something in him went with her. Alara sank into the chair across from him. I found the room. Figured you would eventually. Ezra tapped ash into his palm. Cade keeps it locked. But locks don't mean much to someone curious enough. He looked at her. You know why he won't leave this mountain? Alara shook her head. He built this place. Built it for them. Sarah and Emma. Every board. Every nail. This house was supposed to be their future. Ezra looked around the kitchen. After they died, Cade could have sold it, could have walked away and started over somewhere else. But he didn't. This mountain's all he's got left of them. Alara felt something crack open in her chest. So when Marcus Grayson arranged our marriage, Cade saw a way to protect the only thing he's got left. Even if it meant tying himself to a stranger, he's not a bad man, Alara. Ezra stubbed out the cigarette on the sole of his boot. He's just a broken one. That doesn't make me feel better about being used as bait. No. I don't imagine it does. Ezra stood, joints popping. But you should know something. When Cade agreed to marry you, he didn't do it because Grayson forced him. He did it because your father was about to lose everything, and Cade knows what that feels like. He figured if he was going to be trapped either way, might as well help someone in the process. Alara looked up at him. Where is he now? Timberline, probably. Working himself into the ground like he does when things get heavy, Ezra headed for the door. Then stopped. One more thing. You find any papers lying around? Letters? Ledgers? Anything like that? Why? Because Marcus Grayson doesn't make moves without covering his tracks. And if Cade has proof of what Grayson's been doing, that's leverage. The kind that might keep you both alive. Alara thought about the crate in the shed. I found a ledger. It showed Grayson changing my father's debt. Ezra's expression went hard. Where is it now? Cade took it. Good. Don't let it out of your sight. That ledger is worth more than gold right now. He put his hat back on. You seem like a smart girl, Alara. Smarter than most who end up in situations like this. So I'm going to give you some advice. Don't trust anyone from town. Not the judge, not the sheriff, and sure as hell not anyone who works for the bank. Grayson's got his fingers in everything. Then who do I trust? Ezra smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. You trust Cade, and you trust me. That's about it. He left before Alara could ask anything else. She sat alone in the kitchen, Ezra's words rattling around in her head. A broken man, a dead family, a mountain full of ghosts. Alara stood, went back upstairs. To the locked room, the door was closed again. But this time it wasn't locked. She pushed it open slowly, half expecting Cade to appear and throw her out again. The room was exactly as she'd left it. Crib, rocking chair, photograph. Alara picked up the picture, studied it closer. Sarah Thornton had been beautiful in a quiet way. The kind of woman who probably didn't know it. Emma looked like her, same dark hair, same eyes. Alara set the photograph down and noticed something she'd missed before on the shelf. Tucked behind the baby shoes was a small wooden box. She opened it. Inside were more letters. But these weren't from the bank. The first one was addressed to Cade. Written in a shaky hand, Cade, "I'm sorry about what happened to Sarah and Emma. I know words don't fix nothing, but I wanted you to know I'm thinking about you. If you need anything, you know where to find me." Thomas Hazelara's hands went numb. Her father had written to Cade after the mine collapse. She pulled out another letter. This one was newer, dated just a few months ago. "Mr. Thornton, I hate to ask, but I'm in a bad spot. The bank's calling in my debts and I don't have the money. I know you don't owe me nothing, but if there's any way you could help, I'd be grateful. Thomas Hayes," and below it, in different handwriting, "Tom, I'll see what I can do, see." Elara read it 3 times. Cade had tried to help her father before Marcus Grayson ever came into the picture. She kept digging through the box. More letters, more evidence of a friendship she never knew existed. And then at the bottom, she found something else, a contract dated 2 years ago. It was between Cade Thornton and the Ashford Bank and Trust. Signed by Marcus Grayson, the terms were simple. Cade would borrow $5,000 to expand his mining operation, with Black Ridge Summit as collateral. If he defaulted, the property transferred to the bank. Alara's heart stopped. Cade had taken out a loan from Marcus Grayson, which meant if something happened to him, if he couldn't make the payments, Grayson would get the mountain, whether Alara was alive or not. She heard the front door open downstairs. Alara shoved the letters back into the box, hurried out of the room, closed the door behind her. Cade stood in the kitchen, covered in sawdust and dirt, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. "You talked to Ezra," he said. "It wasn't a question. He came by." "What did he tell you?" Alara descended the stairs slowly. "About Sarah and Emma." Cade's jaw tightened. He had no right, maybe not. "But I'm glad he did." Alara stopped at the bottom step. "I also found more letters." "In the locked room, you went back in there. The door wasn't locked." Cade turned away, braced his hands on the table. "What'd you find?" "Letters between you and my father, and a contract with Marcus Grayson." His shoulders went rigid. "You borrowed money from him," Elara continued. $5,000. "With Black Ridge Summit as collateral, I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice." Cade spun around, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw real anger in his eyes. "No, you don't. You think I wanted to crawl to Marcus Grayson and beg for money. You think I wanted to put this place on the line? I didn't. But the mine was tapped out, the timber wasn't selling, and I had 6 months to make enough money to keep the property taxes paid or lose everything. So yeah, I took his goddamn loan, and now he owns you. He owns all of us." Cade's voice dropped. "That's the point. Grayson sets the trap, and we all walk right into it." Alara crossed her arms. "When's the loan due?" "End of the year." "Can you pay it back?" Cade looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, bitter and sharp. "No." "So what happens when you can't?" "I lose the ridge. Grayson takes it, and you become a widow with nothing." Alara felt cold all over. "Unless something happens to me first, which is why you stay here, on this mountain, where I can see you. I'm not a prisoner, Cade. You will be if Grayson gets his hands on you." They stared at each other across the kitchen, the weight of Marcus Grayson's plan settling between them like a third person in the room. Finally, Alara spoke. "We can't just wait here to die. We survive." "That's not a plan." Cade grabbed his coat from the back of the chair, headed for the door. "It's the only one we've got." He left, slamming the door behind him. Alara stood in the empty kitchen, shaking with frustration, and made a decision. If Cade wouldn't fight back, she would. That night, Alara went through every piece of paper in the house, every scrap, every receipt, every letter stuffed in drawers that hadn't been opened in years. She found the ledger Cade had taken from the shed, copied down every altered entry, every forged signature, Every lie Marcus Grayson had told and written down like gospel. She found receipts from the bank. Letters between Grayson and other landowners along the proposed railroad route. Contractings with clauses buried so deep you'd need a lawyer to find them. By the time the sun came up, Alara had built a case. Marcus Grayson hadn't just gone after her father and he'd done this to at least 6 other families in Ashford. Changed debts, forged signatures, foreclosed on properties that should have been safe. It was a pattern, and patterns could be proven. Alara bundled the papers together, hid them under her mattress. Then she went downstairs, made breakfast. Cade came in an hour later, still not speaking to her. They ate in silence. Finally, Alara set down her fork. "I'm going into town." Cade looked up. "No, you're not. I need to see my father." "Your father's fine. You don't know that." Ezra checked on him last week. "He's still breathing." Cade pushed his plate away. "You're not going. You can't keep me here." "Watch me." Alara stood. "I'm not asking for permission." Cade rose too, blocking the door. "You go into town. Grayson's going to know. And the second he knows, he's going to make a move. Then let him. At least we'll see it coming. Or you'll end up dead." Alara met his eyes. "I'm already dead if I stay here doing nothing." They stood there, locked in a stalemate, until finally Cade stepped aside. "You've got 2 hours," he said. "After that, I'm coming to get you." Alara grabbed her coat, left before he could change his mind. The ride down the mountain felt longer in daylight. Alara took the wagon, driving it herself over the same muddy ruts Cade had navigated 2 weeks ago. By the time she reached Ashford, her hands were cramped. Her back ached, but she didn't care. She needed answers. The town looked the same as it had on her wedding day. Gray buildings, gray sky, people moving through the streets with their heads down, minding their own business. Alara drove straight to her father's house. It wasn't a house anymore. It was a shell. The windows were boarded up, the door hanging off its hinges. Weeds had already started growing through the porch. Alara's chest tightened. She climbed down from the wagon, ploughed through the broken door. Inside, everything was gone. Furniture, dishes, even the curtains. The place had been stripped clean. "He's not here." Alara spun around. A woman stood in the doorway, old and bent, squinting at her. "Mrs. Cartwright." "That's right." The old woman stepped inside, leaning heavily on a cane. "You're Tom Hayes's girl? Heard you married that Thornton fellow. Where's my father?" "Moved out a week after you left. Couldn't afford to stay, I imagine. Last I heard, he was renting a room above the tavern." Alara's stomach sank. "The tavern?" "Yep. The Silver Bell. You know it." Alara knew it. It was the kind of place her father had always said he'd never end up. She thanked Mrs. Cartwright, drove the wagon to the other end of town. The Silver Bell sat on the corner of Main and 3rd. A squat building with peeling paint and a sign that hadn't been updated in 20 years. Alara tied the horse outside, went in. The tavern smelled like old beer and regret. A few men sat at the bar, drinking even though it wasn't even noon. Behind the counter, a heavy-set man with a scarred face watched her. "Help you?" "I'm looking for Thomas Hayes." The bartender jerked his thumb toward the stairs. "Room 3. But he's probably asleep." Alara climbed the narrow staircase, knocked on the 3rd door. No answer. She knocked again, harder. "Dad, it's me." The door opened a crack. Her father peered out. He looked terrible, thinner than she remembered. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. "Alara." He blinked like he wasn't sure she was real. "What are you doing here?" "Can I come in?" He hesitated, then stepped aside. The room was barely big enough for a bed and a chair. A bottle sat on the floor, half empty. Alara's heart sank. "Dad, I know." He sank onto the bed, rubbed his face. "I know what it looks like. It looks like you've given up. Maybe I have." He laughed, bitter.
What's the point?"
Everything's gone. The farm, the money. I'm right here. No, you're not. You're up on that mountain with a man you don't even know. And it's my fault. He looked at her, and Alara saw tears in his eyes. I ruined your life, Alara. Just like I ruined everything else. Alara sat down beside him. Marcus Grayson ruined your life. Not you, Grayson gave me the rope. I'm the one who hung myself with it. He lied about the debt. Changed the numbers. I saw the ledger. Her father went still. What ledger? Grayson's ledger. It showed your real debt. 3,000, not 8. How do you? Cade had it. Along with a bunch of other papers proving Grayson's been doing this to half the town. Alara grabbed her father's hand. We can prove it, Dad. We can show everyone what he's been doing. Thomas Hayes pulled his hand away. It won't matter. Yes, it will. No, it won't. Men like Marcus Grayson don't answer for what they do. They buy their way out. They pay off the right people. They win. He walked to the window, stared out at the street. You should go back to the ridge, Alara. Stay with your husband. At least you're safe there. I'm not safe anywhere. Neither are you. Neither is Cade. Grayson's not going to stop till he has everything. Then let him have it. Her father turned around. I'm tired of fighting, Alara stood. Well, I'm not. She left before he could say anything else. Outside, the sky had turned dark, clouds rolling in from the west. Alara climbed onto the wagon, started back toward the mountain. She was halfway there when she saw the riders, 3 of them. Coming fast from the direction of town, Alara's pulse spiked. She snapped the reins, urging the horse faster, but the wagon was too slow. The riders caught up within minutes. One of them grabbed the horse's bridle, forced the wagon to a stop. Alara recognized him, Garrett, one of Marcus Grayson's men. Tall, mean-looking, with a scar that split his upper lip. Mrs. Thornton, he said, grinning. Going somewhere? Get out of my way. Can't do that. Mr. Grayson wants to see you. I don't want to see him. Wasn't a request. The other 2 riders moved to flank the wagon. Alara's hand went to the knife she kept in her coat pocket, but Garrett saw the movement. Shook his head. Don't be stupid. You're outnumbered. Let me go. Soon as you talk to Mr. Grayson. One of the other men climbed onto the wagon, grabbed the reins from Alara's hands. She tried to pull them back, but he shoved her hard enough that she nearly fell off the seat. Easy, Garrett said. We're just escorting you. No need to make it rough. They turned the wagon around, headed back toward town. Alara's mind raced. If she screamed, no one would hear. If she jumped, she'd break something. If she fought, they'd hurt her. So she sat still and waited. They didn't take her to the bank. They took her to Marcus Grayson's house, on the hill overlooking Ashford. It was the biggest house in town. White with columns and a wraparound porch. The kind of place that announced its owner's wealth from a mile away. Garrett helped her down from the wagon, his grip tight on her arm. Mr. Grayson's waiting inside. Alara pulled free. I can walk. She climbed the steps, went through the front door. The inside of the house was just as excessive as the outside dark wood. Expensive rugs. Paintings that probably cost more than her father's farm ever had. Marcus Grayson stood in the parlor, pouring himself a drink. He was younger than Alara expected, 40 maybe, with slicked back hair and a suit that fit too well. He looked like money, old money. The kind that bought people and didn't think twice about it. Mrs. Thornton, he said, turning. Thank you for coming. I didn't have a choice. Of course you did. You could have screamed, fought, run. He sipped his drink, but you didn't, which tells me you're smarter than your father. Alara's hands curled into fists. What do you want? To talk. Have a seat. I'll stand. Marcus smiled. Suit yourself. He gestured to the chair anyway. Like he expected her to change her mind. When she didn't, he sat down himself. I assume you know why you're here, because you're a coward who can't take no for an answer. The smile disappeared. Careful, Mrs. Thornton. You're in my house, and you're trying to steal my husband's land. I'm not trying. I'm succeeding. Marcus leaned back, swirling his drink. Cade took out a loan. He can't repay it. At the end of the year, Blackridge Summit becomes mine. That's not theft. That's business. You changed my father's debt, forged the records. That's fraud. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Who told you that? I saw the ledger. Did you now? He stood walking toward her slowly. And where is this ledger? Somewhere safe. I doubt that. He stopped in front of her, close enough that Alara could smell the whiskey on his breath. You're a smart girl, Alara. Smart enough to know you're in over your head. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to that mountain, and you're going to convince Cade to sell. He names a price, I pay it, and everyone walks away happy. He won't sell, then he'll lose it anyway, and so will you. Marcus's voice dropped. Accidents happen on mountains, Mrs. Thornton. Rock slides, fires, mining collapses. Would be a shame if something happened to Cade before the year's out. Alara's blood went cold. You're threatening to kill him. I'm stating facts. Marcus stepped back, finished his drink. Now, are you going to help me? Or do I need to make things difficult? Alara met his eyes. Go to hell. Marcus sighed. I was hoping you'd say that. He nodded to Garrett, who grabbed Alara's arm, started dragging her toward the door. Wait, Alara said. You can't just, I can do whatever I want. This is my town. Marcus set his glass down. Take her to the bank. Lock her in the back office. I'll deal with her later. Let me go. Garrett tightened his grip, and Alara felt something snap inside her. She twisted, drove her elbow into his ribs. He grunted. She yanked her arm free, ran for the door. She made it 3 steps before another man grabbed her from behind. Alara screamed. A gunshot cracked through the air. Everyone froze. Cade stood in the doorway, rifle raised, pointed straight at Marcus Grayson. Let her go, he said. Garrett released Alara immediately. Marcus held up his hands. But he was smiling. Cade? Good to see you. Shut up. Cade stepped inside, the rifle never wavering. Alara, come here. Alara ran to him. He pulled her behind him without taking his eyes off Marcus. You made a mistake coming here, Marcus said. You made a mistake touching my wife. Your wife came to my house willingly. Marcus shrugged. Prove otherwise. Cade's finger tightened on the trigger. I don't need to prove anything. If you shoot me, you'll hang. Worth it. For a moment, Alara thought he was actually going to do it. But then Cade lowered the rifle, grabbed Alara's hand. We're leaving. Marcus's smile widened. See you at the end of the year, Cade. Cade didn't answer. He pulled Alara out of the house, down the steps, onto the wagon. He didn't say a word until they were halfway up the mountain. Then he finally spoke. Are you okay? Alara nodded. Even though she wasn't sure, what the hell were you thinking? Going into town? I needed to see my father, and look where that got you. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're lucky I showed up when I did. How did you know where I was? Ezra saw Grayson's men grab you. Came and got me. Cade's jaw was tight. I told you not to go. I'm not a child. Then stop acting like one. Alara turned on him. I was trying to help. I found proof of what Grayson's been doing. Evidence we can use. Evidence doesn't matter if you're dead. They fell into silence. The wagon climbed higher. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of snow. Finally, Alara spoke. He said he's going to kill you. I know. Before the loan comes due, so he can take the ridge without paying you. I know. Then what are we going to do? Cade didn't answer for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was quiet. We're going to survive, just like I said. But this time, Alara didn't believe him. The first snow came 3 days later. Alara woke to find the world outside her window buried under 6 inches of white, and more falling. The temperature had dropped so fast that ice had formed on the inside of the glass. She could see her breath in the room. Downstairs, Cade was already up, feeding logs into the fireplace. "Storm's going to get worse," he said without looking at her. "We're snowed in for at least a week." Alara pulled her shawl tighter. "What about supplies? We've got enough. Ezra brought extra last week." He straightened, wiped his hands on his pants. "You know how to shoot?" The question caught her off guard. "What? A rifle? Can you shoot one? My father taught me when I was 12. "Why?" Cade walked to the corner, pulled down a Winchester from the rack on the wall, handed it to her. "Keep this with you." All the time, Alara took the rifle, felt its weight. "You think Grayson's going to come up here in this?" "I think Grayson's going to do whatever it takes to get what he wants. And a snowstorm's good cover for making people disappear." He grabbed his coat. "Headed for the door. Where are you going?" "To check the mine. Make sure the supports are holding." He stopped at the threshold. "Don't open the door for anyone except me or Ezra. And if someone tries to get in, you shoot first and ask questions later." Then he was gone, disappearing into the white. Alara stood in the empty house, holding the rifle, and wondered if this was what the rest of her life was going to look like, waiting, watching. Always one step away from violence. She set the rifle on the table, went to make coffee. The day dragged. Alara cleaned the kitchen twice, reorganized the pantry, tried to read a book she found on Katie's shelf, but the words wouldn't stick. Her mind kept going back to Marcus Grayson's house. The way he'd smiled when he threatened Cade, the casual certainty in his voice when he said accidents happen. By late afternoon, Cade still hadn't come back. Alara paced the kitchen, glancing out the window every few minutes. The snow had stopped, but the world was silent in that heavy way that comes after a storm. No birds, no wind, just white and quiet. She was pouring her fourth cup of coffee when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Alara grabbed the rifle, moved to the window. Through the trees, she could make out a rider coming up the path, not Cade. The horse was too small, and the rider sat wrong in the saddle. Alara's heart hammered. She checked the rifle, made sure it was loaded, positioned herself behind the door. The hoofbeats stopped outside. A knock. "Mrs. Thornton." "It's Ezra." Alara exhaled, opened the door. Ezra stood on the porch, covered in snow, his face grim. "We got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves Marcus Grayson and about a dozen men headed this way." He stepped inside, stomped snow off his boots. "They left town an hour ago. I rode hard to beat them here." Alara's stomach dropped. "Why are they coming?" "Don't know. But they're armed. And they're not coming for tea." Ezra looked around. "Where's Cade?" "The mine." "Damn it." Ezra ran a hand through his hair. "All right. You need to go get him. Tell him what's happening. I'll stay here and slow them down if they show up before you get back. I'm not leaving you alone. I've been in worse spots." He pulled a pistol from his coat. "Set it on the table." "Go now." Alara grabbed her coat, ran. The path to the mine was treacherous. Half buried under snow and ice, Alara slipped twice, catching herself on tree trunks. Her breath coming in ragged gasps, the cold burned her lungs. But she didn't slow down. The mine entrance was a black hole in the side of the mountain, timber supports framing the darkness. Alara stopped at the edge, peering inside. "Cade." Her voice echoed back at her. She grabbed a lantern hanging by the entrance, lit it, went in. The tunnel sloped downward, the walls narrowing as she descended. Water dripped somewhere in the dark, and the air smelled like wet stone and rust. Alara's hands shook as she held the lantern higher, trying to see more than a few feet ahead. "Cade, down here." His voice came from deeper in the tunnel. Alara followed it, moving carefully over the uneven ground until she found him. Cade was on his knees, inspecting one of the support beams. He looked up when she approached, frowning. "What are you doing down here?" Ezra came. He said, "Marcus Grayson's on his way up the mountain." With a dozen men, Cade stood. Slowly. "When?" "Now. An hour ago. They're coming." He grabbed his tools. Started back toward the entrance. "How many men?" Ezra said 12. "Armed?" "Yes." Cade cursed under his breath. When they emerged into daylight, he scanned the tree line, his expression hard. "We don't have much time." They ran back to the house. Ezra was on the porch, rifle in hand, watching the path. "They're close," he said. "I can hear them." Cade climbed the steps 2 at a time. "How close?" 10 minutes. "Maybe less." "All right." Cade turned to Alara. "Get inside." "Upstairs." "Don't come down no matter what happens. I'm not hiding while you—" "This isn't a discussion." His voice was steel. "You go upstairs. You lock the door. And you don't come out until I tell you it's safe." Alara wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. She went inside, climbed the stairs, but she didn't lock the door. Instead, she cracked it open, just enough to see the hallway and hear what was happening below. Cade and Ezra were moving furniture, barricading the windows, loading rifles. Their voices were low, clipped, efficient. Men who'd done this before. "You got extra ammunition?" Ezra asked. "In the shed." "I'll get it." "No time." "They're here." Alara's breath caught. Through the window she could see them. Riders emerging from the trees, spreading out in a half circle around the house. Marcus Grayson sat in the middle, on a gray horse, looking like he owned the mountain already. Cade stepped onto the porch. Rifle in hand. "That's far enough." The riders stopped. Marcus dismounted, brushing snow off his coat. "Cade, we need to talk." "We've got nothing to talk about." "I disagree." Marcus walked forward slowly. Hands visible, no weapon drawn. "I came to make you an offer. I'm not interested. You haven't heard it yet. Don't need to." Marcus stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. $10,000. Cash. For Black Ridge Summit. "You sign the deed over to me today and you walk away with enough money to start over anywhere you want?" "No, Cade." "Be reasonable." I said no. Marcus's expression hardened. "Then you're making this harder than it needs to be. You're the one who rode up here with an army." "Insurance." Marcus glanced at the men behind him. "I'm a businessman, Cade. I don't like loose ends." "And you've become a very loose end." Cade raised the rifle, pointed it at Marcus's chest. "Get off my land, or what?" "You'll shoot me in front of a dozen witnesses?" Marcus smiled. "You're not that stupid. Try me." For a moment nobody moved. Then one of Marcus's men shifted in his saddle, hand moving toward his gun. Ezra's rifle cracked. The man's hat flew off his head. He froze. "Next one's not a warning." Ezra called from the side of the house. Marcus's smile disappeared. "You're making a mistake, Cade. Wouldn't be the first time. Now get the hell out of here before I put a bullet in you just for the principle of it." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned, walked back to his horse. But he didn't leave. Instead, he climbed into the saddle and addressed his men. "Burn it." Cade's face went white. "What?" "You heard me. Burn the house, the barn, the shed. All of it." Marcus looked back at Cade. "You won't sell." "Fine, but you're not keeping it either." Two of the men dismounted. Pulling bottles from their saddlebags, Alara realized with horror what they were. Kerosene. Cade fired. The shot hit the ground in front of the first man, kicking up snow and dirt. The man stumbled backward. "I will kill every last one of you," Cade said, his voice shaking with rage. Marcus just smiled. "No, you won't. Because the second you kill one of my men, the rest will kill you. And then they'll kill Ezra. And then they'll find your wife and kill her too." He leaned forward in his saddle. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to put down that rifle, and you're going to watch your house burn. And when there's nothing left, you're going to sign over the deed to the land, and you're going to leave. That's the deal." Cade didn't lower the rifle. Marcus sighed. "Light it up." The men moved toward the house. And then something happened that nobody expected. Glass shattered upstairs. A gunshot cracked. One of the men with kerosene went down, clutching his leg, screaming. Everyone looked up. Alara stood in the window, rifle raised, smoke curling from the barrel. "The next one goes through your head," she called down to Marcus. Marcus's face twisted. "You little—" Cade fired. The bullet hit the ground inches from Marcus's horse. The animal reared, nearly through him. She said, "Get off our land," Cade said. His voice was ice. "So get," for a moment. Marcus looked like he was going to give another order, but then he saw Alara reload. Saw Ezra step out from behind the house, a second rifle trained on him. Saw Cade's finger tighten on the trigger. And he must have realized he was outnumbered, not in numbers, but in will. "This isn't over," Marcus said. "Yeah, it is," Cade stepped forward. "You come back up this mountain, I won't shoot to warn. I'll shoot to kill. And I won't lose a minute's sleep over it." Marcus yanked his horse around. "Let's go." His men hesitated. Now they grabbed their wounded man, threw him over a saddle, and rode. Within minutes, they were gone, disappearing back down the mountain the way they'd come. Cade lowered his rifle, turned to look up at the window, where Alara still stood. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Alara set the rifle down, came downstairs, stepped out onto the porch. Cade was waiting. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into his arms, held on like she might disappear. "You were supposed to stay upstairs," he said into her hair. "I don't follow orders very well," I noticed. Ezra walked up the steps, stopped at the top, looked at them both. "Hell of a shot, Mrs. Thornton." Alara pulled back from Cade. "My father taught me. Remind me to thank him." Ezra glanced down the mountain, where Marcus and his men had vanished. "He'll be back." "I know," Cade said. "With more men next time." "I know. And he won't give you a chance to shoot first." "I know." Ezra was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Cade. "We need a plan. We've got one. We survive. That's not a plan. That's hope. It's all we've got." Alara stepped forward. "No, it's not." Both men looked at her. "We have evidence," she said. "Grayson's ledger, the forged documents, proof of what he's been doing to half the town." "Evidence doesn't stop bullets," Ezra said. "No, but it stops him from getting away with it after." Alara crossed her arms. "There's a federal marshal in Denver, handles territorial fraud cases. If we can get the evidence to him—" "We can't," Cade interrupted. "We're snowed in. And even if we could get down the mountain, Grayson's men are watching the roads. Then we wait until the snow melts. The loan comes due in 10 days. Alara met his eyes. "I'm not giving up, Cade. And neither are you." Cade looked at her. His shoulders dropped. "Just a little." "All right," he said quietly. "We fight." Ezra nodded. About damn time they went inside and started planning for war. The snow melted faster than anyone expected. 3 days of warm wind from the south turned 6 inches of white into rushing streams down the mountain. By the 4th day, the roads were passable. Barely, but passable. After much debate, Alara convinced Cade and Ezra that their best chance was to rally the town. To show everyone what Marcus Grayson had been doing, Judge Carver called a town meeting. Ezra had ridden down the day before with a message. Told the judge there was evidence of fraud at the bank. Evidence that needed to be seen by everyone. The judge agreed, reluctantly. But he agreed. The meeting was set for Saturday afternoon. In the town hall, Alara spent the night before going through the ledger one more time, making notes, marking pages. She barely slept, and when she did, she dreamed of Marcus Grayson's smile, that cold, certain smile, like he'd already won. Saturday morning, Cade saddled 3 horses. "You sure about this?" he asked. Alara tightened the straps on her saddlebag. "Where the ledger was hidden?" "No, we can still turn back." "And do what?" Wait for Grayson to come finish what he started? At least here we've got cover, high ground. A defensible position. We also have no allies, no help, and no way to stop him from burning us out. Alara swung up into the saddle. We do this now, or we lose everything. Cade looked at her, then at Ezra, who just shrugged. She's reckless. Same thing, sometimes. Cade climbed onto his horse. If this goes wrong— It won't, Alara interrupted. But if it does, then we fight our way out. She kicked her horse forward. Let's go. The ride down the mountain took an hour. They took the main road, no hiding, no sneaking. If Grayson's men were watching, Alara wanted them to see, wanted them to know she wasn't afraid anymore, even though she was terrified, actually. But fear and courage weren't opposites. They were partners. And right now, Alara needed both. The town hall was packed when they arrived. People standing shoulder to shoulder, farmers, shopkeepers, families, all of them whispering, wondering why they'd been called. Alara walked in first, Cade and Ezra behind her. The whispers stopped. Everyone turned, stared, at the girl who'd married the mountain man, the girl they'd all pitied and written off as dead. Judge Carver stood at the front, looking uncomfortable in his robes. Mrs. Thornton, he said, you have the floor. Alara walked to the front of the room, set the ledger on the table, looked out at the sea of faces, and realized she had no idea what to say. No speech prepared, no clever words, just the truth. So she started there. My name is Alara Thornton. Most of you know me as Alara Hayes, Thomas Hayes's daughter. The girl whose father lost his farm. A few heads nodded. What you don't know is why he lost it. She opened the ledger. My father owed Marcus Grayson $3,200. That's what the original loan said. That's what he signed for. Alara turned the ledger around so they could see, but 3 months ago, Grayson changed it, doubled the debt to $8,000, called it an adjustment, and when my father couldn't pay, Grayson took the farm. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. That's a lie. Someone called from the back. Alara looked up. Lawrence Finch stood in the doorway, one of Grayson's men. Mr. Grayson is a respected businessman, Finch continued. He wouldn't. He did. Alara held up the ledger. It's right here. In his own handwriting. That could be forged. It's not. She flipped through the pages, and it's not just my father, George Miller, Sarah Peterson, the widow Henshaw. 8 families in this town, all with debts that were changed, increased, forged. She looked out at the crowd. How many of you owe money to the bank? Slowly, hands went up. 1, 2, 5, 10. More than half the room. How many of you have seen your debt increase without explanation? The hands stayed up. That's what I thought. Alara closed the ledger. Marcus Grayson has been stealing from this town for years. Lying to you, cheating you, and you've let him. Because it was easier than fighting back. What are we supposed to do? Someone asked. He owns the bank. He owns half the town council. We take this to the federal marshal in Denver, and who's going to listen to us? They'll listen to evidence. Alara tapped the ledger. This is proof. Legal. Documented. Undeniable. If we all stand together, if we all testify. Grayson can't buy his way out. He can't threaten his way out. He goes to prison. Finch laughed. You really think it's that simple? No. I think it's that hard. Which is why we've been too afraid to try. Alara looked at him. But I'm not afraid anymore. You should be. Finch stepped forward. Mr. Grayson is a powerful man. He has friends in high places, and he doesn't take kindly to being accused of. I don't care what he takes kindly to. Alara's voice cut through the room. He destroyed my family. He tried to destroy my husband, and he's been destroying this town for years. I'm done being quiet about it. She turned back to the crowd. The question is, are you? Silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then George Miller stood up, the farmer who'd lost his land 2 years ago. I'll testify. Another voice from the back, "So will I, me too." One by one, people stood, until more than half the room was on their feet. Finch's face went red. "You're making a mistake." "The only mistake," Ezra said from the side of the room, "is thinking we're going to stay scared forever." He walked forward, stood next to Alara. "I'm Ezra Blackwell. Some of you know me, some don't, but what you should know is this. I spent 15 years as a territorial investigator before I retired, and I've been watching Marcus Grayson for the last 2. He gestured to the ledger. "Everything Mrs. Thornton just said is true, and Grayson's willing to kill to keep his schemes hidden." Gasps. "That's slander," Finch said. "It's truth." Cade stepped forward now. "Grayson came to my mountain 3 days ago with a dozen armed men, told me to sell or he'd burn me out. When I refused, he ordered his men to light the place on fire." More gasps. "The only reason my house is still standing is because my wife shot one of his men before they could." Cade looked at Alara. "She's braver than anyone in this room. And she's right. If we don't stop Grayson now, he'll keep taking, keep stealing until there's nothing left." He turned to the crowd. "So yeah, I'll testify too." Judge Carver banged his gavel. "Order, please." He looked at Finch. "Mr. Finch, I think it's time you left. Mr. Grayson will hear about this. I'm sure he will." Finch glared at Alara, then turned and stormed out. The door slammed behind him. Judge Carver cleared his throat. "Well, this is highly irregular, but given the evidence presented, I believe a formal investigation is warranted. I'll contact the federal marshal's office in Denver." In the meantime, he was cut off by the sound of hoofbeats. Lots of them. Everyone turned to the windows. Outside, riders were approaching, 15, maybe 20. Led by Marcus Grayson himself, Alara's stomach dropped. "He knows," she said. Cade moved to the window. "He knows." The riders stopped in front of the town hall. Marcus mounted, walked up the steps, opened the door, stepped inside. He was smiling, that same cold smile. "Well," he said, "isn't this cozy?" He looked around the room. "I heard there was a town meeting. Thought I'd stop by, see what all the fuss was about." Nobody answered. Marcus's eyes landed on the ledger, still sitting on the table. His smile widened. "Is that mine?" "It was," Alara said. "Now it's evidence." "Evidence of what?" "Fraud, forgery, theft." "Those are serious accusations, Mrs. Thornton. They're true." "According to who? A ledger anyone could have altered?" He walked forward. "You've been spending too much time on that mountain. I think the isolation is affecting your judgment. My judgment is fine." "Is it?" Marcus stopped in front of her. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've committed theft. That ledger is property of the Ashford Bank and Trust, and you took it without permission. I found it in my private office, which you broke into." He turned to Judge Carver. "I want her arrested." The judge hesitated. "Mr. Grayson, she's a thief." "Arrest her. The ledger contains evidence of criminal activity," Ezra said. "Alleged criminal activity." Marcus turned to face him. "And who are you?" "Ezra Blackwell, former territorial investigator." Former being the key word. Marcus smiled. "You have no authority here. I have eyes and a brain, and both of them tell me you've been stealing from this town for years. Prove it, we will." "In federal court, will you?" Marcus gestured to his men outside. "Because I don't think you're going to make it to federal court." Cade stepped forward. "That a threat?" "It's a fact." Marcus looked at him. "You've been a thorn in my side for 3 years, Thornton. I gave you chances, multiple chances, to do this the easy way, and you refused. Every single time. Because you're a liar and a thief. I'm a businessman. You're a criminal." Marcus's expression hardened. "And you're a dead man." He nodded to his men. They started moving toward the door. Cade raised his rifle. "Don't," Marcus laughed. "What are you going to do? Shoot me in front of 100 witnesses?" "If I have to, you won't." Marcus turned to the crowd. All of you out. Now, nobody moved. I said out. Still nothing. And then something happened that Marcus clearly hadn't expected. George Miller stood up. No. Marcus blinked. What? I said no. We're not leaving. Another voice. Neither am I. Me neither. One by one, the people in the room stood between Marcus and the door. Blocking his way, Marcus's face went red. You're all making a very big mistake. The only mistake, George said, is thinking we're going to keep letting you walk all over us. He stepped forward. You took my farm, Grayson, lied about my debt, threw my family out onto the street, and I've been too scared to do anything about it. But not anymore. Me too, someone else said. And me. The voices multiplied until the whole room was talking, shouting, demanding justice. Marcus looked around. And for the first time since Alara had met him, he looked uncertain. This isn't over, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Yeah, Cade said. It is. Marcus turned, walked to the door. His men parted to let him through. He stopped on the threshold, looked back at Alara. You just signed your death warrant. No. I signed yours. Marcus left. His men followed. Within minutes, the sound of hoofbeats faded, and the town hall erupted in noise, people talking, arguing, planning. Judge Carver banged his gavel. Order! We need order! It took 10 minutes to calm everyone down. When the room finally quieted, the judge looked at Alara. Mrs. Thornton. I'm going to send a telegram to the federal marshal's office immediately, and I'm going to ask for an emergency investigation. How long will that take? A week. Maybe 2. The loan comes due in 10 days. I understand. But this is the process. Alara nodded. Then, we'll wait. The judge hesitated. You should know. Grayson's not going to wait with you. I know. He's going to come for you. Soon, I know. Alara looked at Cade, who met her eyes and nodded. Then we'll be ready, she said. They rode back to the mountain in silence. The sun was setting by the time they reached the summit, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Alara dismounted, stood in front of the house, looked at it. Really looked at it for the first time since she'd arrived. It wasn't just wood and stone, it was home. Cade came up beside her. You did good today? We did good, no. That was you. Standing up in front of everyone, telling the truth even though you were scared. I was terrified. I know. He took her hand, but you did it anyway. Alara looked at him. What happens now? Now we wait. And if Grayson comes, then we fight. And if we lose? Cade was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to face her. Fully. I need to tell you something. What? The reason I agreed to marry you. It wasn't just to help your father. Alara's heart skipped. Then why? Because I was tired of being alone. His voice was rough. For 7 years, I've been locked up on this mountain. Convinced I didn't deserve anything good. Convinced I was being punished for what happened to Sarah and Emma. He reached up, touched her face, and then you showed up. Angry and scared and so damn brave. And you made me feel something I thought was dead. What? Hope. Alara's eyes burned. Cade, I'm not good at this. Talking. Feeling. Any of it. But I need you to know. Whatever happens tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. I don't regret this. Any of it. He pulled her close. I choose you, Alara. Not because of a debt. Not because Grayson forced us, but because I want to. Alara looked up at him, at the scar on his face, the pain in his eyes, the quiet strength that had kept her alive. I choose you too, she whispered. And then she kissed him. It wasn't their first kiss. But it was the first one that mattered, the first one that was real. When they finally pulled apart, Cade rested his forehead against hers. We're going to survive this, he said. Promise? Promise. They went inside, and for the first time since Alara had arrived on Black Ridge Summit. The house felt warm, not because of the fire, because of something else, something that felt dangerously close to love. 3 days later, Marcus Grayson made his move. It was just before dawn when Ezra came pounding on the door. "They're coming." Cade was up in seconds. Rifle in hand. "How many?" 20. "Maybe more." "How far?" 20 minutes. "I rode hard to warn you." Cade turned to Alara. "Get upstairs. Lock yourself in the room with the—" "No, Alara. We do this together, remember?" She grabbed her rifle. Checked the ammunition. "I'm not hiding anymore." Cade looked at her, then nodded. "All right, Ezra, take the east window. I'll take the west. Alara, you're upstairs, covering the front approach." "Got it." They moved into position and waited. The sun was just starting to rise when the riders appeared, combing up the path in 2 columns. Marcus at the front. He didn't bother with threats this time. Didn't bother with talk, just raised his hand. And his men opened fire. Bullets shattered the windows, punched through the wooden walls. Alara dropped to the floor, heart hammering. Cade returned fire. So did Ezra. The sound was deafening. Alara crawled to the window, aimed, fired. One of Grayson's men went down. She reloaded, fired again. Another man fell, and another. But there were too many. For every one they hit, 2 more appeared. "We can't hold them," Ezra shouted. "We have to." Cade fired. Reloaded, fired again. But his ammunition was running low. They all were. Alara looked down. 3 bullets left. That was it. "Cade." "I know." And then, through the chaos, Alara heard something, hoofbeats. More of them, coming from the east. Oh God, more of Grayson's men. They were surrounded. "Cade." "I hear it." But then she saw them, not Grayson's men. The town, George Miller at the front, followed by 20 others, farmers, shopkeepers, men and women, all armed, all riding hard. They crashed into Grayson's men from the side, the element of surprise breaking the attack. Grayson's men scattered. Some tried to fight. Some ran. Within minutes, it was over. The shooting stopped. Silence settled over the mountain, broken only by the sound of horses. And men groaning. Alara stood. Looked out the window. Marcus Grayson was on the ground, his horse gone, blood on his shirt. George Miller stood over him, rifle pointed at his head. Alara ran downstairs, Bert out onto the porch. Cade was already there. "Is it over?" she asked. "I think so." They walked down to where Marcus lay. He looked up at them and laughed, bitter, defeated. "You think this changes anything?" "It changes everything," George said. "I have lawyers, friends, money." Had. Ezra appeared, holding a piece of paper. "Federal marshals coming tomorrow with an arrest warrant for fraud, forgery, attempted murder." He looked at Marcus. "You're done." Marcus's face twisted. He reached for something in his coat, a gun. Cade fired, self-defense. The bullet hit Marcus's shoulder, spun him back. Not fatal. Just enough to disarm him. Marcus dropped to the ground, clutching the wound. Screaming, "Someone get him a doctor." Cade said. He turned away. Walked back to Alara, pulled her close. "It's over," he said. "Is it?" "Yeah, it is." The federal marshal arrived the next day, took Marcus Grayson into custody, along with Lawrence Finch and 3 others. The trial was held in Denver 2 weeks later. Alara and Cade testified. So did George Miller and Sarah Peterson and the widow Henshaw and 12 others. The jury deliberated for 2 hours, came back with a verdict, guilty on all counts. Marcus Grayson was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His assets were seized, his bank dissolved, and every fraudulent debt he'd created was forgiven. Thomas Hayes got his farm back. So did George Miller. And 8 other families. The town of Ashford started to heal. Slowly, but it started. And on Black Ridge Summit, Alara and Cade started something too. Something new. They rebuilt the parts of the house that had been damaged, expanded it, a new room overlooking the valley, and in the spring they planted apple orchard, 20 trees, Sarah's dream, now theirs. 6 months after the trial, they got married again. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. Ezra officiated. Thomas Hayes gave Alara away. Sober, present, proud. And when the pastor asked if Alara took Cade to be her husband, she didn't hesitate. I do. And do you, Cade Thornton, take Alara to be your wife? Cade looked at her, smiled, that rare, precious smile. I do. They kissed. And the small gathering on the mountain erupted in cheers. That night, they sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. You know what I realized today? Alara asked. What? This was never about the mountain. Cade looked at her. No, no. It was about having something worth fighting for. She took his hand, and I found it. The mountain? You. Cade pulled her close. I found it too. They sat in silence for a while, just breathing, just being. And then Alara said, I have something to tell you. What? I'm pregnant. Cade went very still. You're sure? Doctor confirmed it last week. For a moment he didn't react. Then he stood, pulled her up, held her like she might break. I'm terrified, he whispered. So am I. What if something happens? Nothing's going to happen. You don't know that. No. But I know we're going to try anyway. She pulled back, looked at him. We're not Sarah and Emma, Cade. We're us, and we're going to be scared, and make mistakes, and probably mess up 1,000 times. But we're going to try. Cade touched her face. How did I get so lucky? You married a girl who was too stubborn to stay scared, he laughed. Best decision I ever made. They stood there, holding each other. 7 months later, their daughter was born. They named her Hope. No explanation needed. The years passed quietly on Black Ridge Summit. The apple orchard grew. 20 trees, just like Sarah had dreamed. The timber business prospered. Thomas Hayes stayed sober, becoming the grandfather Hope adored. And Ezra remained on the mountain, teaching a little girl to track deer and name the stars. The town of Ashford healed slowly, but it healed. And every evening, when the work was done, Cade and Alara sat on the porch, watching the light fade over the mountain, not saying much, just being, because some stories don't end, they just become home.